Let's cut across to our panelists. Joining me right now from the United States of America this very early morning, Yashwant Deshmukh, founder, director, Sea Voter. Rohit continues to be with us. Geeta Mohan will also be joining us from Florida. Shashank Mattu, who is in the studio from me, tracking the demography and the gender gap. Rohit, you were speaking earlier and touching on this as well. So the women vote we've spoken of, it did show up for Kamala Harris, but possibly not as much as she had hoped it would. On the other hand, what really counted for Donald Trump was the bro code.
It did, and he was doing, he was going on, as we were saying, he was doing things to appeal to his voters, his voter base in this case. Look, he did not, he stayed on his message. He did not try to be everything to everybody. And I think that's a pitfall for Democrats. They tried to be everything to everybody. He knew who his voter base was. He wanted to energize them, and that's exactly what he ended up doing. He wasn't going to look out for, votes that he would not able to win. I mean, towards the end of it, we saw him definitely with, Muslim Americans and Hindu Americans and, writing tweets and hanging out with them. But he did not change his stance just to get their votes. All he said was when he was meeting with them, that I will make sure I'll lower your taxes. I'll make sure that I'll close the border. His messaging was consistent, Preeti. I think that plays a huge role. As far as Democrats are concerned, you see them at the temple, they are saying something completely different. You see them somewhere else, they're saying completely different. So I think that messaging of Donald Trump with a very disciplined approach has worked. And look, we all saw him very, very happy, very humble yesterday, and that's what the messaging has been from the Republican campaign. He was trying to soak it all in since the first assassination attempt. He has been saying this, that God has saved him to do something bigger and better, and that's what he said last night. Our golden years are to come here.
Yashwant Deshmukh, very good morning. Where are you this morning? And did you predict what these results expected, Yashwant?
Hi, Preeti. Yeah, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, and yes, pretty much. Unlike India, where there is always a complication of converting votes into seats, there is no such complication, thankfully, in US.
But many pollsters, Yashwant, got it wrong in America also this time.
No, we got it right. Thankfully so. We got it right 8 years back as well. But jokes apart, the thing is that it's very critical to understand that why exactly Donald Trump managed to carry this mandate. And, it's also critical to understand that barring females, which arguably went in favor of Kamala Harris big time, and there was a reason because of the issue of the abortion and the sensitivities around that. But largely speaking, look at the minority vote bank where Trump has made huge inroads. For the first time in history, I think Republicans have got majority of the male Latino voters. I don't even know the last time when actually Republicans polled among the Black African-American voters in double digits. So much so that almost every fourth male African-American voter has voted for Donald Trump. Females, of course, Latino female and Black females have voted for Kamala Harris, no doubt about that. But somewhere down the lane, you realize that it was all about economics. The number of people, the households who were saying that inflation is the big issue, economics crisis is real. They are unable to make their ends meet. At some point of time, it was difficult for me to say, am I looking at the data from India or data from US, that महंगाई है, बेरोजगारी है, and to cap it all, the funny thing was, Preeti, that the nara that we have been listening in India for 10 years, लोकतंत्र खतरे में है, that the same exactly, that democracy is in danger. If Trump wins, democracy is gone. And somewhere, I think not only Democrats did that campaign, but they actually started believing in it, because in a very typical way, yesterday's exit poll numbers also show that while only 6 out of 10 Republican voters voted against Kamala Harris, almost every third Democrat voter voted against Donald Trump. So this was a negative mandate in order to believe that this is what we stand for. And if, God forbid, Donald Trump wins, then there would be no more democracy in US. And the othering in the cancellation culture was so acute over here that following that culture, at some point of time, Democrats did not realize where exactly they cancelled themselves.
Well, you're right there. Rohit, do you concur with Yashwant Deshmukh in terms of especially how the past data has played out? And adding to that, what many thought could be a racial divide, more than that, it does seem to be a very clear gender divide.
Absolutely. I think, well, some of it, I know I was with Yashwant on the call the other day when he was releasing this data. I think, look, at the end of the day, I don't think, Preeti, it was nobody bought that message. I don't think even in the Democrats. I think they were hoping. I think abortion was the number one issue for them. This democracy, this constitution thing. I think it wasn't. Nobody voted for or against it. I think people were worried about certain things. They were worried about some of the progressive policies. I've talked to people who are worried about what's being taught in school. I've talked to people who are worried about the restrooms where male can use female restrooms and females can do the vice versa. I think those were the issues with a lot of Latino voters because they're conservative voters, Preeti. Also, the fact that people saw Donald Trump as somebody under who the economy was doing well. There were jobs. People, I don't think really it did not matter to them that what Kamala was saying as much. What mattered to them was who was watching out for them, and it was the consistency of President Trump on his message about jobs, immigration, securing the border, and also making sure that there are no wars to be fought. And I think that message where American people sat down and said, look, domestically, we want to be doing better than what we're doing right now. And that's why people have overwhelmingly voted for them. Look at Latino voters also, Preeti. Some of these are hardworking people who are doing two jobs to make their end meet. I mean, and when Donald Trump is saying, hey, you were earning a lot of money when I was president, that's true. Because post the pandemic, there were challenges across everywhere, I think, in the world. So I think he'd appealed to that and he stayed on that message. I honestly do not believe when, I'm seeing a lot of analysis from Democrats and from Republicans. They're slicing data whichever they want to, and you can do that. But I think it was mostly on economy. And as Bill Clinton famously said, it's the economy, stupid. So I think he won it on that, where he said, I'm going to make, I'll make
Right.
America great again. You'll have more jobs. I'll bring down inflation and I'll secure the border. I think that is why people in America have overwhelmingly voted for President Donald Trump.
So it was the economy, the gender also a fallout of that. Shashank Mattu bringing you in, because especially where, because we're focusing on the gender divide and the, gap in this election and how debated and talked of it was. And it is somewhere down the line mirroring, of course. Economy has been the bulwark of what this election outcome is. But Shashank, you did see Donald Trump read what was going on in, the polity and change his strategy, especially where the reach out to a particular, a hyper-masculine, under 30, Gen Z male voter.
Right, that was absolutely a part of the campaign. Look at the people that he brought in, right? There was Dana White, who's best known for UFC, which is a professional fighting unit. He's Joe Rogan. He, of course, went on a very famous podcast. It's very, very clearly watched. Kamala Harris, by the way, chose not to go on Joe Rogan's podcast, which, by the way, when the votes were coming in, young men were asked about why they voted for Donald Trump. Some of them said that Kamala Harris refused to come on the Joe Rogan podcast. She instead went for podcasts that targeted young women instead. She didn't show up on podcasts that are traditionally aligned with young men. This whole thing was a strategy to get apolitical young voters who did not vote in numbers that the Republican Party would have liked them to. This entire campaign was focused around getting them in, getting them to vote, because they know that for the last 30 to 40 years, or even perhaps even before that, Republicans have always enjoyed more support from men. Democrats have enjoyed more support from women. The Republicans realized that they were not getting through to younger male voters, and they chose a campaign strategy very effectively, it turns out, to target younger men. Now, among 18 to 29 men, it still seems like Harris came out ahead, but she did not win by a margin that mirrored anything like the margin that she won with young female voters. There has always been a gender divide in the American elections, but that gap significantly expanded today with young women choosing to back Kamala Harris by massive numbers, but young men really trending towards Donald Trump at this point in time. Rohit was saying something about Latino men as well, and that is really one of the big stories of this election that the Democrats are going to have to get into. These are voters who feel like they have been taken advantage of by the Democrats. It just felt to many of them that they were being taken for granted, minority voters being taken for granted by center-left parties, and that this was something they wanted to put an end to. One more thing that I wanted to say on the economy, that women, by and large, did support Kamala Harris. But you look at the economy, when you ask them, do you think the economy is doing well? Those who felt the economy was doing well, which is a small number, voted overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. But the more and more people felt that the economy was doing poorly, they in fact voted decisively for Donald Trump. In fact, for women who thought the economy was doing poorly, Donald Trump won by an 80-20 margin, which is something that you don't normally see, that kind of overperformance from a Republican candidate. So absolutely, when it came down to the economy, people voted on the basis of their pocketbooks. Kamala Harris was not able to convince moderate voters. In fact, even women who agreed with her on abortion, moderate women, only backed her by a 52-47 margin. That's peanuts. And when you talk about women who disagreed with her, they backed Donald Trump by an 80-20, 90-10 margin. So she just wasn't able to get the support that she needed on key issues. Meanwhile, Donald Trump was able to get all the support that he wanted on the economy from women, as well as from young men as well. So his election strategy is fired on all cylinders. Kamala Harris has failed on most of the counts that really mattered.
Once again, for the benefit of our viewers, let's, take it one by one. This is, of course, data that we've just got. Let's look at it in terms of how white men have voted this election. Once again, putting that data out on how white men voted, and you can see a 59% for Donald Trump, a 39% for Kamala Harris. Now let's, switch the gender there. How did white women vote? Now, this is where Kamala Harris would have hoped to do better, because not badly, 47% have voted for Kamala Harris, but 52% in that demographic have gone ahead and voted for Donald Trump. Now, let's, switch across where black men are concerned and where the black community comes into question. This is a 78% support coming in for Kamala Harris, with just 20% for Donald Trump. Black women, and they have come out in full support for Kamala Harris. 92%, black women have voted for Kamala Harris, while just 8% have voted for Donald Trump. The devil, usually is in the detail. Here it's in the data. Like I said, the bulwark of this election win could be and is the economy, but one can't really deny the gender gap also and how it plays out. Yashwant, do you concur?
Yes, of course. The gender gap was arguably the thing that actually worked for Kamala Harris. If she would have won the presidency, it would have been only and only because of the gender gap, only and because of the female voters. But look, I guess that they were so overwhelmingly kind of one-sided tracked with the female voters that they thought this is the one thing which will sail them through, which was not the case. So much so that every time Kamala Harris was asked about the economic situation, she kept on saying, we are better off. We are better than where were we 4 years back. And it's the numbers which kind of numbing, because, when they argued that it's record low 2-point-some% inflation when compared to last quarter. Now, people do not realize 2% from the last quarter doesn't mean 2% from the 4 years back kind of thing. Where people remember that, because 4 years back, if something was there for $10, it is costing them $22. That's hitting and that's pinching them. I guess yes, there was a gender gap. There has been, and Kamala Harris was completely, completely buoyant by that. But
that's
also
true.
That's pretty. Yes. Also look into the fact that forget about 50 states, there are more than 2,500 counties, and not even in a single county could Kamala Harris better the lead of Joe Biden. Not a single one across entire continental USA. So that tells you a lot, where it became a one-sided thing on one issue thing.
True. And in retrospect, in hindsight, it's always 2020. It also tells you how myopic the Democrat campaign was.